All right, so we're gonna start off with this warm-up. I would pause the video so you could try this on your own, solve for these things, follow the directions, so pause. All right, so hopefully you paused and tried this problem out. I did the solution, so these two angles, they're equal because they're vertical angles. Vertical angles are always equal. So 10x plus 10 is equal to 11x minus 1. Solve for x and you get 11. All right, so now when I plug that in, so this was 10x plus 10. 10 times 11 is 110, plus 10 gives you 120. And you can plug in for 11x too, right? 11 times 11, plug in for x, is 121 minus 1, 120. That would make these angles 60 because they are a linear pair, right? So that answers our question about measure of angle AEB. It's 60. This means it's the same thing as the arc, right? Central angles and arcs give you the same degree measure. And then if I wanted to find the length of this arc, right? So that's a part of the circumference. I'm using this formula where you get 5.2 feet. All right. All right, new lesson, congruent chords. So this is about chords that are congruent, and there are certain facts. You should pause the video, get these down. You will be quizzed on this. This is gonna come up in your graded assignment for lesson number 6. So pause the video, get it down in your notes. All right, let's get started. So number 1, chords are congruent if and only if their arcs are congruent. So if these arcs are congruent, that means these chords are congruent, right? If this is 115 and this is 115, then this is 10 and 10, for example. All right, number 2, if chords are congruent, then the chords are equidistant from the center of the circle. We'll talk more about that. And then number 3, if a radius or diameter is perpendicular to a chord, then it bisects the chord and the arc. We'll go through that. All right, so rule. So if we wanted to solve this problem, which rule does it use? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? You can pause, try to figure out for a second. All right, so this is referring to rule number 1, right? So congruent chords means that there's congruent arcs, right? So since SR, so this is rule number 1, since SR is congruent to ST, I know that because of these tick marks. That means that these two arcs will be congruent. So let's list out all the things we know. These two segments were congruent, which are our arcs. That also means RS is congruent to ST, right? These two arcs here are congruent, right? Since these two chords were. And we also know that SR is equal to 115 degrees, and that's talking about the measure. So if I wanted to solve for x here, what do I know about this and this? Well, they're congruent. So I can just say 7x plus 24 equals 115. Start off by subtracting 24 on both sides. I still have room. So these cancel. And you end up with 7x equals 91. Divide by 7. These cancel. And you end up with x equals 13. And that's all that wanted. All right. Problem number 2, you can pause the video if you need to get this down. The problems are going to get a little bit more difficult, but not by much. All right, so MP is 5x minus 34. MP is this line right here. Then it says p to n is 2x minus 4. Getting this information from right here. So what are these lines that they're talking about? This is a line that starts from a chord and goes to the center. So we're using rule number 2, right? So it says if chords are congruent, and we know they're congruent because these arcs are congruent, which means the chords are congruent, then the chords are equidistant from the center. Equidistant means equal distance. So M is the same distance to P as N is to P. So that means we know MP is going to be congruent to NP. So let's solve for X. What's my equation I set up? Well, MP was 5x minus 34 and PN was 2x minus 4. So I'm just saying 5x minus 34 is equal to 2x minus 4. Let's combine like terms, add 34 to both sides. 5x equals 2x plus 30. Subtract 2x on both sides. 3x equals 30, divide by 3, x equals 10. So if I wanted to figure out just MP, you're taking your x, plug it back into this formula. So instead of x, plug in 10. So 5 times x becomes 5 times 10, which is 50. And what is 50 minus 34? 16. All right, one more problem together before the practice. I would pause this, get everything down. All right. So this is a lot of information, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill out my circle. I hope you drew it pretty big on your paper too. So the measure of R to Y. So R to Y is this right here. And it is, this blue part is 7x minus 15 degrees, right? This is talking about an angle measure, a degree measure, I mean. All right, so we also have W to Z. So WZ is 12x minus 8. All I did was draw in my information. All right, so I have this part, and then this is a hole. So I have to think back to the rules I had. Which fact is going to talk about this? It's probably going to be number 3, right? It's the one we didn't use. If a radius or a diameter is perpendicular to a chord, then it bisects the chord and the arc. So bisects means cut in half, and it's cutting a chord in half and that arc. So this line right here from C to R is cutting 2 things in half, right? The first thing it's cutting in half is the chord. So this is congruent to this. And then it's also cutting these 2 things in half. And don't forget, if this right here is 30 degrees, then this is 30 degrees, right? Because chords are congruent, which means arcs are congruent. All right, so the rule we're using is number 3, right? And that just means that chords and arcs are congruent and bisected. All right, let's lay out some stuff we know right now. So what do I know from this problem? Well, one thing's for sure. RY is going to be congruent to RX. So the measure of RY is going to be congruent to the measure of RX. But if these 2 things are congruent, then over here we got the same thing. These are also going to be congruent to measure of arc SZ and measure of arc WS. All of these are congruent. So if this is 20 degrees, that's 20 degrees, that's 20 degrees, that's 20 degrees, because they're the congruent chords, which make congruent arcs. All right, what else do I know? Let's look at the big picture. We have this big WZ. What would the measure of arc WZ be congruent to? This big arc here. Well, XY. All right, that's what we know. That's all we need to know right now to move forward with this problem. All right, solving for x, setting up this equation might be hard. We know that this whole thing is congruent to this whole thing. I only have this. If I want to say these two things are equal, I have this whole, I need this whole, which means I need to know what this right here is. And this should be pretty easy, right? These two things, they're congruent. So if this is 7x minus 15, this is 7x minus 15. Now I can set up my equation. The right side is easy. What do I have over here? This whole thing was 12x minus 8. But over here, I don't just have a 7x minus 15. I have it twice. I have a 7x minus 15 and another 7x minus 15. All right, let's start off by combining like terms. 7x plus 7x is 14x. Minus 15 minus another 15 is minus 30. I'm going to add 30 on both sides. I'm going to subtract 12x on both sides. I end up with 2x equals 22. We divide by 2. X equals 11. All right. Now they want to know Ry. This was Ry here. I have 7x minus 15, but I know what x is. X was 11, so I plug it in. 7 times 11 is 77. 77 minus 15 is 62, which means R to Y is 62. Right here, 62 degrees. R to X, it's gonna be the same thing, also 62. And then W to Z, well, it's 62 plus 62, which is 124. All right. We're about to dip into some individual practice problems. All right, copy these problems down, then pause the video, try them on your own. All right, here are your solutions. 29, 104 degrees. All right, this is the last problem we're gonna do. You can pause the video and get everything down, and then we can go over it. All right, so Z is the center, cool. R to S is 18. From R to S is 18. If this whole thing was 18, would I know about this and this? 9 and 9, which also means that this is 9 and 9. All right. T to Y was 42. So this right here was 42 degrees, which means that this is 42 degrees, which means that this over here is 42 degrees, and this over here is 42 degrees. All right, the last thing is WZ was 3. So from W to Z was 3. These two things are also congruent. So if this is 3, this is 3. Now doing this problem should be really easy. All right, T to V. T to V is 9. T to U, 9 plus 9, 18. W to S, 9 again. The measure of y to u. Y to u, 42. R to S, this is talking about the arc. What's 42 plus 42? 84. And then finally, Z, V, 3. All right, that's chords.